Good afternoon. In this class today, I want to look at the nature of inequality and equality and inclusion in our classrooms in Australia. I want to look at sociological perspectives and as well to look at classroom application for us as teachers. Many scholars, parents and teachers have noticed a huge gap in the academic achievement and future work and life opportunities that are given to children and students from different cultural, linguistic, racial, socioeconomic, rural versus urban, and gender and other different locations and settings. There's also a need to better understand the complex issues of these inequalities of education, work and life, and the different opportunities that they present, so we can teach more effectively. These differences in opportunity appear to be exacerbated by unequal access to knowledge, resources and support at all levels of education and then on into the workplace and in society. And equipping teachers to address these inequalities, to be aware of them, can make a major difference for the opportunities for learning and for work and life that our students face, because we as teachers spend such a lot of time with our students and we're entrusted with such a large amount of their development and teaching. For these reasons, teaching that is aware of social justice issues, inequalities and ways of addressing them so as to establish equality is particularly important. And for us teaching in Christian schools, there's a unique opportunity to share with our students how our understanding of God's purposes, the love of God, the hope that we have in Christ and the presence of God's Spirit that brings love, joy, peace and fruits of the Spirit to our students can make such a huge difference. Kevin Wishow, in his book Against Common Sense, says that many people have a common sense feeling that we should be able to just allow people to compete in the classroom, and those that put in the most effort should be rewarded, and those who are less successful, less able, or put in less effort should be simply given the lower grades. He contends that while these perspectives and values and ideologies seem to be logical to some extent and seem to feel right to some extent, they tend to promote existing power imbalances, and they fail to look at many of the reasons for these imbalances. These common sense expectations often reinforce privileges of certain cultural groups or certain gender groups or social groups, such as white, male, middle, upper class children and families, over against those who come from more marginalised or socially disempowered, coloured, non-male, children from poorer locations and regions, and from non-mainstream cultures and subcultures. So Kumashiro's argument that our teaching can inadvertently be oppressive to some people and students, and that a more anti-oppressive teaching is needed, also says that this approach of not being oppressive to some groups and students is not always going to be easy, because there'll be some resistance. That is, many people will find that there are ingrained, comfortable attitudes that promote the existing status quo that tend to continue to promote disadvantage for students from certain cultures and backgrounds. Kumashiro advocates that to redress these concerns, we need to begin by acknowledging the causes of disadvantage, the hidden curriculum that many teachers and schools have, and to begin to develop a deeper understanding of the causes of these disadvantages and the steps that we can take to practically address them. And there's many scholars that provide insights into these areas, and using Google Scholar search engine, you could locate some of these. Looking more closely at critical pedagogy, the term critical pedagogy seeks to more critically examine some of these causes of inequality It seeks to more critically understand the teaching process and preparing teachers for the challenge of encouraging equal opportunity for students does benefit from this more critical approach. Critical social theory is a multidisciplinary approach that acknowledges the benefit of many different disciplines such as psychology, sociology, and teaching scholarship, helping us to discover the way to promote freedom or emancipation as an emancipatory function of our teaching and knowledge communication. This goal of promoting critique or careful examination has many benefits, and it can also pass on to our students and to our colleagues the value of critical examination of that which we are considering. And as Christians too, we recognise the value of critique and critical examination, and we see it in the prophets in the Old Testament and in the life and ministry of Jesus and in the epistles of the Apostle Paul. Social justice paradigms are also found being emphasised in Old Testament and New Testament and the teachings of Jesus and the writings of Paul. Social justice paradigms and the distributive paradigm of justice draws on the principles by which goods are distributed in society, challenging the neoliberal notion that free market competitive world can just freely distribute goods and opportunities differentially to different people from different backgrounds. John Rawls highlights the need to consider the variation in the capacity of different people and groups to access limited material and non-material resources, including different quality schools, different educational resources, job opportunities, and teaching approaches. And he encourages us to be more aware of these differences and to develop strategies for helping all students to equally access resources and opportunities. Rawls highlights the importance of considering justice-related issues, such as the nature of culture, gender marginalisation, stereotyping, the influence of colonialism and imperialism, and reflecting on the ways different groups in society use language, worldview positions, power networks to access or restrict access to resources and opportunities. Young, too, in Justice and Politics of Difference, notes that there are many areas to consider in addressing the challenges of the understanding of the causes of injustice and the strategies needed to bring equal opportunity for all. And from a Christian perspective, and the perspective of a Christian teacher and those of us who teach in Christian schools, the Bible too has much to say about the importance and value of social justice and care and compassion for all people, about the nature of unequal power and how this arises, and the ways in which we can promote equal access to all students and to all people in our care. We're reminded of the passage from Micah 6, verse 8. What does the Lord require of us? To act justly, to love tenderly, to walk humbly before God. And we see this theme of love and justice throughout all of the Old and New Testament, and we see it throughout the history of Christian ministry and pastoral care. In the Queensland Catholic Education Commission document on social justice in school, the document says these dimensions for acting justly include, firstly, a sense that there is natural law and divine law that recognise the rights and laws that govern all families and all people in dealing one with another. That is, just like there are natural laws, so there are laws in the universe, both the natural universe and also the divine universe that God is administrating, which recognise the importance of access to resources that are needed for all people. Thomas Aquinas explained that a man has a number of natural inclinations, and he begins by describing those positive inclinations to pursue the life for ourselves and others to seek truth, to seek the best, that which is right. There's a natural inclination for us to do good, which reflects the natural law, where we see a plant grow naturally, develop leaves, become taller, where we see fruit appear. All around us, we see natural law showing the goodness and order in the world around us. By natural law, Aquinas doesn't mean a law that's separate from God, but rather the law that's part of God's good creation and his good purpose for this world. And Romans 2:14-15 says that when the Gentiles who have not the law do by the nature those good things, they recognize that there is this law towards order and goodness and beauty and abundance that's within each one of us. And they show the work of the law written in their hearts, that is the work of goodness and the work of awareness of that which by conscience and intuition is not right. And Platinger defines this as biblical shalom, or goodness, as universal flourishing, wholeness, delight, abundance. And there is much within us that stirs delight and joy when we have a sense of the goodness that God has given to us. So natural law can be seen as an awareness of the goodness and abundance that God gives to the world that we're a part of. And it can be seen in the sense of order and creativity and living things and in the natural world around us. But there's also another law that appears to be at work in the world, and that is the law of not doing right. And so in Romans 7, Paul writes, when I want to do good, there's another law which is evil right there within me. For my inner being, I delight to do the good that is placed within me, God's law. But I also see another law at work, that is, at times I don't do what is right. And he could be thinking here of the 10 Commandments. That is, at times one is tempted to lie, to steal, to harm, to hurt, to do that which is damaging to another, or at times we don't have the full knowledge or understanding that's required to do right. Paul writes in chapter 3 and then on in Romans 7 verse 23, I see another law at war, warring against the law of my mind, seeking to do good, making me a prisoner at times to the law of sin at work within us. So sin can corrupt not only our lives as individuals, but it can also corrupt our communities, our societies, our culture, and there can be that which is a tendency to favour, say, men over women, disadvantaging some, favouring those who are white, middle class, upper class people, the few, the elite over others, favouring one group over another. And a tragic outcome of the situation is not only individual, but also communal. That is, not only the isolation of individuals one against another, but the isolation of one community or group against another. And sinful pride can make one group serve their own selfish interests over the interests of another group. And we could see this all throughout our societies, bringing injustice to one group despite the pursuit of benefit from another. This can be partly due to isolation and the fallacy that sin can seek to justify itself. The Catholic position on social justice in education and schools also states there's an importance of the distributive justice that apportions the benefits in a community based on needs that are at times unmet by those who are expected to bear a greater burden. That is, there are some who are poorer or who have less opportunity, and they're expected to work for a lower wage. They're expected to get lower results in their classes. They don't have their abilities that some others. There's an unequal distribution that's seen all around us. Some people are shorter than others. Some people are less able than others at music or art or sport. Some due to their gender differences or physical differences or mental or personality differences may be left out and have less opportunity. Some due to their cultural differences or racial differences. And because of this different distribution of goods, there's a need to consider distributive justice that seeks to balance and help those who miss out. Just like in a family, there may be the younger 2 or 3-year-olds who have less opportunity than those who are older, 5 or 6-year-olds, less opportunity than the teenagers, less opportunity than the adults. And so we need to have a distributive justice that recognizes missing out in various ways. Thirdly, social justice means working to eliminate the structural causes of poverty and missed opportunity and lower access to resources, particularly amongst the poor. And so we need to recognize what are the structural causes of injustice. So within our schools, some may be located in rural areas with less resources. Sometimes we'll use language that'll favor one group over another. Sometimes there'll be a power imbalance where certain in the administration of a school or certain in the school are going to have power that's going to disadvantage some. Some parents from wealthier backgrounds will have access to more resources and thus promote motivation for some over others who feel less motivated. Some have access to more information and some have prejudices. So social justice seeks to communicate and help and distribute other aspects of justice so that people can flourish. And then fourthly, a biblical perspective on justice recognizes God's good creation, recognizes the fullness of humanity, and recognizes that God wants to restore all people through generosity, grace, love, and concern, especially those who are poorer, have less access to resources, and who are more vulnerable. So for Christians, the Bible tells us much, not only about being created good, but also about fallen nature and also the possibility of loving restoration for those who enable God's goodness to come and flow into us and bring us back into his good purposes. According to McLaren, the classroom teacher is in a unique position to bring this to pass. The classroom teacher, he says, is a liminal servant who seeks to free people from the hegemony of the everyday, from being caught up in injustices and being able to fully experience the goodness and the sacred communitas of knowing that is available to us. Some in the past who've emphasized the goodness aspect of creation include Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who was born into a Christian Calvinistic family. And in 1762, he wrote to the Archbishop of Paris saying that he'd been born into a city with a wholly reasonable religion, and he remained attached to the faith of his father. Rousseau wasn't so much against religion, but rather against institutions and societies that became corrupted. And he was concerned with the potential of corruption that he emphasized that as individuals, people needed to turn to that which is right and true and good. And we need to recognize the potential in every child to pursue that which is right and good. And Rousseau's view of education places an emphasis on the first aspect of this biblical truth, that God creates people with the potential for good. And Rousseau's focus is on the idea of natural development, discovering a child's natural inclination towards good. Of course, others focus on the second aspect that we've mentioned of the biblical perspective, that is, that people can fall into sin. And in contrast to Rousseau, Rosenstock-Hesse is an example of someone who sees the dangers of the natural inclinations, and both can be present in the classroom, those who are enthusiastic for good and those who are less enthusiastic and pursue other ways of gaining attention in the classroom. And so too in societies. Some societies will at times pursue that which is good, and other societies at times will pursue that which is more selfish. According to Hussey, the only thing that can save humans from the natural inclination towards doing wrong is the rebirth that can come. in which evil is to put to one side and good comes. And this has insights for us in the classroom, recognizing the importance of safe space for expression, and also when things aren't so good or go wrong, for grace to turn around and go well. Cletus shows evidence that Rousseau held both the goodness of the human person, created for good intentions, and sinful inclinations to be present within society and within human people. Turning now to the textbook by Germov and Paul on Public Sociology, Chapter 11, we see a description here of dominant approaches to the needs of schools and education to counter inequality and to promote equal opportunity and access for all our students. And two of the main approaches, one is the neoliberal freedom approach, free market approach, and the other is the social justice approach that we have been discussing. In the free market neoliberal approach, it's thought that freedom of choice by families, freedom of choice by children, by people, should lead to less government intervention, deregulation, privatisation, and letting each individual make decisions about where they go, which school they go to, and what is done with schools. Those who promote the free market neoliberal approach point to the God-given freedom, perhaps, of human agency. That is, accountability, resilience, grit, competition, minimalising the impact of social contributions, family contributions, and societal contributions, saying that the individual can achieve much if they're given the freedom. Graham Slater argues that the term such as effort and resilience and functions and endurance are neoliberal terms that are approaches to education that also place an emphasis on individualism, depoliticising, and these tend to shift the blame of students not doing so well away from access to resources, away from environment, away from society, to the effort made by an individual. And of course, both can be true. Individual role and also the role of societies, politics, economics, and social settings. So we see here competition between these two approaches, the neoliberal approach with an emphasis on freedom, and the social justice approach with an emphasis on the role of societies. And you might want to explore these further. Neoliberalism advocates school choice and choice by children and family choice, freedom to choose. Unfortunately, it tends to accept that if you end up in a poorer area or if you have less resources, you have to tend to accept what you have, although there is the argument that you could work your way up. Neoliberalism argues that increased choice and diversity can be of benefit. It argues that outcome of quality comes from competition, and outcomes less centralised schools giving flexibility can bring greater competition and benefit. And it says that incentives come from rewarding those who are able to put in the most effort and get the best results. So privatisation tends to flow out of the neoliberal approach, and neoliberalism's emphasis on preparing individuals for a competitive global market is seen to be of benefit. By promoting individualism, self-reliance, neoliberalism encourages an entrepreneurial thinking, which is seen to be a characteristic of our society today. Now, neoliberalism has been criticised by a number of people. Henry Thoreau, for instance, says that the neoliberal approach is dystopian, that it tends to promote a world of injustice where we criticise systems who don't have the resources to do better. So Giraud, in his book Beyond Dystopian Education in a Neoliberal Society, says that many teachers or administrators, since the systems work for them and they've done well, assume that other students will do the same, but that may not be the case. You may be privileged for certain reasons and not be aware of others who have less opportunity. The neoliberalism education approach does little to address causes of inequality and injustice. It often treats education as a commodity, as a resource, and it ignores the many other aspects of education, such as care and love for one another, sharing with one another, and other aspects of education. It often emphasises standardised testing, and those who show good results are rewarded, and those who have low results are given less opportunity. It often places less emphasis on public education with access to all and more opportunity for those who already have opportunity and privilege. It often teaches autonomy in working conditions, that is, encouraging teachers and children to pursue autonomy, and saying rightly so that there is benefit for autonomy, but it can lessen the emphasis on networking interrelationship with one with another. It often places an emphasis on education as job training rather than looking at the many other voluntary aspects in life, such as being a mother or a carer, or the voluntary roles that many people play in society. It often places an emphasis on major powerful groups and excludes marginalized groups. Often is short-term in focus rather than considering the long term. Often place an emphasis on funding rather than considering other ways in which people might value what they do. There can also be a loss of public good focus in the neoliberal approach and a narrow definition of success. It can promote cultural homogenization, where everyone's encouraged to be like the majority group rather than to recognize the differences that are very valid within minority groups, such as minority cultural groups. Now, it could be argued that the Christian message, with its emphasis on justice, could be a counter to neoliberalism, though there are others also, particularly within the evangelical community, who say that the Christian emphasis has an emphasis on individualism and reward for effort. And there can be the theme of individualism, bringing opportunity in some biblical passages. And so again, we see this competition between the different dominant views about the way schooling should be pursued, that of the neoliberal free market competition, and that of the social justice caring for the marginalised. Clarkson provides an excellent analysis of the history of the rise of fundamentalisms that can at times align themselves either with the neoliberal or the social justice approach by emphasizing a narrow focus on a fundamental, which can either be described as the neoliberal free market or it can be described as the social justice, social concern focus. So fundamentalism flourishes when a group of people or population is pressured to be obedient to one dominant ideology or voice or leader or authority and subservient to that dominant authority. It often cuts itself off from outside belief and competition and discussion of different ideas, and it often keeps silent or apathetic towards different voices and also to the abuse of power relationships, which may keep the dominant ideology to the forefront, whether it be the social justice dominant ideology or the neoliberal dominant ideology. Begin argues that many mainstream Christians have pushed unwittingly towards fundamentalism, and a good critical education should discourage this narrow approach and a broader thinking about the issues at hand and the ways in which we can bring social justice to pass, but also recognizing some of the positive aspects of the neo-fundamentalist approach. That is, individualism is also important. Some measure of competition is also important, as well as concern for the marginalized. The purpose for justice in the world is strongly linked to the theological interpretation of the Christian message that recognizes the importance of both of care for the marginalized, but also reward for effort. Justice within Scripture and in the history of God's people continues to place an emphasis on faithful establishment of truth through God's organizations, including the church and the school. So active discrimination can help to actively counter inequality by lifting up those who feel marginalized. To be a good liberating educator, Paulo Freire wrote, "You must be convinced of the fundamental effort that education is required to do to help liberate people and bring them into hope." So education is not just a mechanical method of instruction, it's a way of bringing freedom and hope and possibility for all people, says Paulo Freire in Education is Politics, Paul Freire's critical pedagogy. Now, even when it comes to religious difference, we need to recognize that there's an importance to avoid exclusion and narrowness of one particular group or view over another, and to encourage inclusion. And the Vatican II Council from 1962 to 65, where many Catholic theologians came together to emphasize the need for acceptance of one another and support of one another, is important. You could look up further on the nature of division between religious groups at the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy, and there's a lot of valuable insights that you could gain from this resource. Peter McLaren's critical pedagogy shows that thinkers like Paulo Freire are leading architects of a society and teaching approaches that can bring hope to our schools and our classrooms. They even suggest that Jesus, like more contemporary thinkers like Marx, through their commitment to the poor and the powerless, showed that as we emphasize the opportunity for all approach, we can promote a more loving engagement with values that are important to us all. Classrooms are particularly important places where this promotion can take place. So to avoid wielding power, we also need to recognize the danger of placing a teacher's voice and authority over their students can hold, and the value of recognizing the voice and view of every student and the opportunity for every student to do well. Gros, in his writing on critical pedagogy, emphasizes that pedagogy and teaching are not only a struggle for knowledge, but also for agency, that every student should feel empowered to have a voice, to have opportunity to fully express all they are and to be all that they are capable of being, while recognizing that every person also has tendencies towards doing wrong. Many forms of human suffering and deficit in human suffering result not only from individual efforts that go astray, but also from institutions and social structures that impose restrictions upon people, and many of us contribute to this. Eric Olin Wright writes that many sociologists have been motivated by social justice concerns and moral commitments to become more involved in this promotion of equality, of opportunity and agency for all, and teachers too have important roles in promoting these opportunities for every person. Validation theory offers a solution to stereotypes which can have negative labels placed on some groups and people or genders by validating the value and the quality and opportunity of every student and every group, even whichever gender or social group or class they come from. Important too in our classrooms is building a sense of agency, value for every student, and building a sense of belonging within the class itself. Christy Bradfield writes, early in my teaching career, I learned that students are most engaged and most invested when they feel they belong to the community, to the class, to the school. This sense of belonging to a community is a feeling that all members matter to one another and to the group and to the class and to the school and to all of the families and students represented. And for much of our school life, we may have this positive affirmation, but you may be able to remember times in your school life journey when there has been a time when you felt excluded, left out. And reflecting on this can help encourage us as ways in which we can have a more positive classroom environment that makes all students feel included. To help make students feel learning their names, pronouncing their names correctly, providing questionnaires asking what they hope to learn and gain from the class and what they value, supporting classroom conversations, helping them feel as though they belong and building upon them, having weekly reflection, writing opportunities and sharing one with another to show that all students' ideas are valued can be also particularly helpful. We need to recognize that at times students will feel a deficit, and we shouldn't blame students because they're shorter or because they are younger, but rather we should recognize that as institutions, the labels that we place on the shorter or the younger students or those who are missing out can be detrimental to them. We need to recognize that there is diversity amongst our students, and we need to promote inclusion of all students. School leaders who effectively meet the needs of lower socioeconomic and disadvantaged groups who are suffering injustice are often those who hold a deep conviction about the good of life and the sense of purpose and mission for life. And for Christians, recognizing the value of helping low socioeconomic structure students and socioeconomic status students, SES students, can be a huge motivation for us. And it can be hugely rewarding as we see those who struggle at times flourish and do well through their life journey. The transforming power of the gospel is often what propels school teachers and leaders to align their school community with a missional statement and core values that promote social justice, remaining steadfast and committed to what we believe about the good and about God and about faith can serve as a model for others. And this commitment to good and to justice can help leave a legacy and example for all. I encourage you to think more deeply about the ways in which you could promote social justice in your school and classroom, whereby you encourage all students to provide a safe, open, caring environment where all can flourish, even those who are a bit shorter, who feel they have less ability, less to contribute, can feel equally involved, equally valued. Thank you.